Imagine a world where every decision we make ripples across continents, shaping the destiny of millions. Today, we delve into a story not just about tariffs and trade, but about power, trust, and the delicate dance between two great nations standing at a crossroads. This is a story of challenge and opportunity, where economic moves carry the weight of global influence and spiritual resilience. As we explore why the U.S. is pressing India and the truth behind the tariff threat, I invite you to open your mind and heart, because what unfolds here will shape our collective future. Stay with me on this journey. The America First policy was a cornerstone of the Trump administration's economic and foreign agenda. At its core, it prioritized U.S. economic interests above multilateral trade agreements or long-standing diplomatic norms. This approach was rooted in the belief that the U.S. had been treated unfairly in global trade for decades, particularly by countries that benefited from open U.S. markets without offering similar access in return. Under this policy, the administration aggressively pursued trade renegotiations and used tariffs as a tool to force foreign governments into more favorable deals. India, as one of the fastest growing economies and a major trade partner of the U.S., came under the spotlight. The U.S. had a persistent trade deficit with India, meaning it imported more from India than it exported there. From the administration's viewpoint, this imbalance was unacceptable and a clear sign that trade terms needed to change. America First was not just about economics, but about reasserting control. It aimed to rewrite global supply chains and disrupt established dependencies. The strategy used pressure tactics like threats of tariffs to push countries into bilateral negotiations where the U.S. believed it held more leverage. For India, this meant being forced to address long-standing issues such as high import duties on U.S. goods and restrictive investment policies. The policy also reflected a broader skepticism toward global institutions like the World Trade Organization, where disputes take years to resolve. Instead, the administration preferred direct pressure to get faster results. In this context, India was viewed as a rising power that needed to either align more closely with U.S. interests or face economic consequences. This pressure campaign wasn't limited to trade, but extended into technology, defense, and energy, all under the same America First logic of maximizing U.S. advantage. The trade deficit between the United States and India has been a consistent point of tension in their economic relationship. A trade deficit occurs when one country imports more goods and services from another than it exports to that country. In the case of the U.S. and India, this meant that American consumers and businesses were buying far more Indian goods than India was buying from the United States. For years, India enjoyed a favorable trade balance, exporting a wide range of products including pharmaceuticals, textiles, jewelry, and information technology services. From the U.S. perspective, this deficit was problematic, especially under an administration that viewed trade through a transactional lens. There was a belief that the U.S. was not getting a fair deal, and that the imbalance reflected barriers to American goods entering the Indian market. These included high tariffs, complex regulatory standards, and restrictions on sectors like agriculture, dairy, and automobiles. At the same time, Indian goods were entering the U.S. with relatively low barriers, often benefiting from preferential trade programs. This imbalance became a symbol of what was seen as one-sided globalization. For the U.S., correcting the trade deficit, it wasn't just about numbers, but about asserting economic fairness and reciprocal market access. It became a priority to push India to reduce trade barriers and open up more to American exports. The deficit also affected political messaging. It allowed American leaders to frame India not just as a strategic partner, but also as a competitor in certain sectors. The persistent gap in trade numbers was used to justify stronger actions, such as revoking trade privileges and threatening new tariffs. These actions were intended to push India toward concessions that would bring more balance to the trade relationship and reflect a more equal partnership. The Generalized System of Preferences, or GSP, was a trade program established by the United States to promote economic growth in developing countries. It allowed certain goods to enter the U.S. market duty-free, giving exporters from eligible countries a competitive advantage. India was one of the largest beneficiaries of this program, with thousands of its products, ranging from chemicals and textiles to engineering goods, receiving preferential access to the U.S. market. In 2019, the U.S. government decided to terminate India's GSP benefits. The move came after long-standing concerns that India was not providing the U.S. with what it considered equitable and reasonable access to its own markets. Key points of contention included India's high tariffs on agricultural and industrial goods, restrictions on U.S. medical devices, and barriers to digital trade and e-commerce platforms. Despite negotiations, the two countries failed to reach a satisfactory agreement, prompting the withdrawal of GSP status. The removal of GSP benefits affected nearly $6 billion worth of Indian exports. Industries such as leather, jewelry, and auto parts were hit the hardest, as their products now faced full import duties in the U.S. market. For Indian exporters, this meant a direct increase in cost and a potential loss of competitiveness compared to suppliers from other countries that still enjoyed duty-free access. Beyond the immediate economic impact, the GSP withdrawal was also a strategic signal. It demonstrated that the U.S. was willing to use trade policy as a pressure tool against even its key partners. The decision marked a shift in the tone of U.S.-India trade relations, reinforcing the message that trade concessions would only continue if they were matched by reciprocal action. While discussions on restoring the benefits continued, the GSP withdrawal served as a clear reminder of the transactional nature of evolving U.S. trade policy. One of the central issues fueling trade tensions between the United States and India has been India's high tariffs on imported goods, particularly those coming from the U.S. Tariffs are taxes placed on imported products, and in India's case, many of these duties are significantly higher than those imposed by the United States. This disparity has long been a point of criticism from American policymakers and businesses, who argue that Indian markets are not as open as they should be for a growing global power and a strategic partner. A major flashpoint was the tariff on motorcycles, especially heavyweight models like those produced by Harley-Davidson. India imposed a 100% duty on these imports, making them significantly more expensive for Indian consumers. Although India later reduced this duty slightly, it remained far above the levels found in most developed economies. Other sectors affected by high Indian tariffs included dairy products, medical equipment, wine, and certain high-tech goods. The United States viewed these tariffs as barriers that limited its export potential and disadvantaged American companies trying to enter the Indian market. These concerns extended beyond just tariffs to include non-tariff barriers such as licensing issues, regulatory delays, and complex import procedures. Together, these policies created what U.S. trade officials saw as an uneven playing field. India, on the other hand, maintained that its tariffs were within World Trade Organization rules and necessary to protect its domestic industries and farmers. However, the U.S. remained unconvinced, especially as it worked to reduce trade deficits and secure more balanced relationships with major partners. The perceived imbalance led to mounting frustration, resulting in threats of retaliatory measures such as the proposed 25% tariffs on Indian exports. The tariff debate became symbolic of larger disagreements over trade access and fairness in the U.S.-India relationship. After the United States imposed tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from several countries in 2018, including India, the Indian government responded with a set of retaliatory tariffs targeting American goods. This move marked a turning point in the trade relationship between the two countries, turning what had been a slow buildup of disagreements into a more direct trade confrontation. The original U.S. tariffs were justified on national security grounds, but India viewed them as unfair and discriminatory, especially given its status as a strategic partner. In response, India drew up a list of American products that would be subject to higher duties. These included items with both economic and symbolic significance such as almonds, apples, walnuts, and certain pulses. California almonds were among the largest exports from the U.S. to India, making them a high-impact target. The retaliatory tariffs imposed by India were carefully selected to hit key U.S. agricultural exports, many of which came from politically important regions. This approach mirrored tactics used by other countries facing similar U.S. tariffs, signaling that India was willing to engage in targeted economic pressure when provoked. These tariff exchanges were not only about economics, but also about asserting sovereignty and maintaining a posture of equality in negotiations. For India, backing down without a response would have signaled weakness. By enforcing retaliatory tariffs, it aimed to demonstrate that it would not accept unilateral trade actions without consequences. The escalation disrupted trade flows and raised prices on both sides, but it also set the stage for broader talks on resolving structural issues in the trade relationship. Although both nations continued to express commitment to strengthening ties, the retaliatory measures made clear that trade could no longer be separated from the larger strategic and political calculations driving the bilateral relationship. As India's digital economy rapidly expanded, the Indian government began introducing new regulations that significantly affected foreign technology and e-commerce companies. Among the most debated policies were those concerning e-commerce restrictions and data localization requirements, both of which became major sources of friction with the United States. India introduced rules that limited the operations of foreign-owned e-commerce platforms like Amazon and Walmart-owned Flipkart. These rules prohibited companies from selling products from vendors they had an equity stake in and restricted exclusive deals. The stated goal was to protect small Indian retailers and create a level playing field. However, from the U.S. perspective, these regulations disproportionately impacted American firms and were seen as protectionist. At the same time, India began pushing for strict data localization policies. These policies required companies handling sensitive personal or financial data of Indian citizens to store and process that data within Indian borders. U.S. companies, particularly in the tech and financial sectors, raised concerns that these rules would increase operational costs, reduce efficiency, and create unnecessary barriers to innovation. They argued that data flows are central to modern global business and that such restrictions could harm India's own digital growth. The U.S. government took these concerns seriously, viewing them not only as commercial hurdles, but as part of a broader pattern of closing off market access. These regulations were frequently raised in bilateral trade discussions and cited as examples of non-tariff barriers. For the U.S., they represented a shift in India's approach to digital sovereignty that could set global precedents, especially as more countries reconsider the balance between data control and global connectivity. As India asserted more control over its digital space, the U.S. interpreted these moves as strategic signals, indications that digital trade and market access would become central battlegrounds in the evolving economic relationship. India's large and rapidly growing healthcare sector has long been an area of interest for American pharmaceutical and medical device companies. However, this interest has also been a source of ongoing trade tensions, particularly due to India's regulatory decisions aimed at keeping healthcare affordable for its population. One of the most contentious issues involved India's decision to cap the prices of essential medical devices such as cardiac stents and knee implants. These price controls were implemented to make life-saving treatments more affordable and accessible for Indian patients. While this move was widely praised within India, it drew criticism from U.S. companies, which argued that the caps made it difficult to recover research and development costs and discouraged innovation. Several major American medical device manufacturers either scaled back their operations in India or voiced strong objections through industry groups. They claimed that the pricing rules were non-transparent and disproportionately targeted foreign companies. The U.S. government raised these concerns in trade talks, stating that such interventions could violate the principles of market access and fair competition. In the pharmaceutical sector, similar concerns emerged over intellectual property rights. The U.S. industry has repeatedly argued that India's patent regime and compulsory licensing laws undermine their ability to protect innovations. India, on the other hand, maintained that its policies are designed to balance innovation with public health needs, especially in a country where millions still lack access to affordable medicine. These disputes are not just about pricing, but also about broader control over healthcare markets and the influence of multinational corporations. For the U.S., India's actions appeared to restrict commercial opportunities for its companies. For India, these measures reflected a national priority of protecting public health over corporate profit. The clash over medical trade became a symbolic example of how national interests can collide even within strategic partnerships. While trade tensions between the United States and India were growing, a parallel track of cooperation was quietly strengthened, particularly in the areas of energy and defense. These sectors became strategic pillars of the relationship, even as disagreements over tariffs and market access played out in the public eye. In the energy sector, India emerged as a significant buyer of U.S. crude oil, liquefied natural gas (LNG), and coal. This shift aligned with India's strategy to diversify its energy sources and reduce dependence on traditional suppliers in the Middle East. For the U.S., it was an opportunity to support its own energy exports while strengthening economic ties with a key Indo-Pacific partner. These purchases were also seen as a way to reduce the trade deficit, offering a more balanced trade equation without major concessions in sensitive sectors. Defense trade followed a similar pattern. India steadily increased its defense purchases from the U.S., acquiring high-end systems such as Apache helicopters, Chinook heavy lift aircraft, and surveillance drones. These deals not only brought billions of dollars into the U.S. defense industry, but also enhanced India's military capabilities at a time of rising tensions with China. Joint military exercises, technology sharing agreements, and strategic dialogues further deepened this cooperation. Despite the friction on trade, both countries continued to frame their relationship as one built on shared strategic interests. U.S. officials often referenced these energy and defense deals to highlight the broader partnership, even when criticizing India's trade policies. For India, these sectors offered access to cutting-edge technology and global recognition as a major defense partner. This dual-track relationship, conflict on trade, cooperation on defense and energy, revealed the complexity of modern diplomacy. It showed that while economic disagreements were real and persistent, they operated alongside mutual efforts to build trust in critical areas of security and infrastructure. India's relationship with the United States cannot be fully understood without considering the broader context of China's rising influence in Asia and beyond. China's rapid economic growth, military modernization, and assertive foreign policy have altered the strategic calculations of many countries, including both India and the U.S. For the United States, China is viewed as the primary strategic competitor, challenging American dominance in trade, technology, and security. In response, the U.S. has sought to strengthen alliances and partnerships across the Indo-Pacific region to counterbalance China's expanding reach. India, with its geographic size, democratic governance, and growing economic and military capabilities, is seen as a critical partner in this effort. The pressure on India through trade and tariffs can be partly explained by this strategic calculus. The U.S. wants India to become a more dependable partner in a broader coalition aimed at containing China's influence. However, this requires India to align more closely with U.S. policies, including opening markets and cooperating on sensitive technology areas. India, while wary of China's ambitions and border disputes, has traditionally preferred a more non-aligned or multi-aligned approach, balancing relations between major powers to maintain its strategic autonomy. This cautious stance sometimes frustrates U.S. policymakers, who seek clearer commitments in trade and security cooperation. The tariff threats and trade pressures can thus be seen as tools to nudge India toward deeper alignment with U.S. strategic objectives. Beyond economics, these measures serve as leverage to encourage India to participate actively in initiatives like the Quad Alliance, support technology sharing, and limit cooperation with China in key sectors. Ultimately, China's strategic shadow looms large over U.S.-India relations, shaping not just defense and diplomatic ties, but also economic policies. The interplay of these factors makes the bilateral relationship complex, where cooperation and competition coexist amid shifting global power dynamics. Trade tensions between the United States and India under the Trump administration were not only about international economics or strategy, but also deeply tied to domestic political considerations. The use of tariff threats and aggressive trade rhetoric served as powerful signals to American voters, reinforcing the image of strong leadership focused on protecting U.S. interests. The message was simple and direct. Foreign countries were taking advantage of the United States through unfair trade practices, and the administration was ready to fight back. By targeting countries like India, which had significant trade surpluses with the U.S., the administration aimed to appeal to key voter groups, including manufacturers, farmers, and workers who felt left behind by globalization. This political signaling also reinforced a broader narrative of America First, suggesting that economic nationalism and protection of domestic industries were priorities above all else. Trade policy became a visible tool in election campaigns, showing voters that their leaders were willing to use tariffs and tough negotiations as weapons to rebalance trade relationships. In the case of India, the 25% tariff threat was a way to demonstrate toughness and resolve. It provided a concrete example of action against perceived trade abuses, helping to solidify political support domestically. The administration's messaging often highlighted stories of American companies struggling to compete due to Indian tariffs, making the issue relatable to everyday Americans. These moves sent signals beyond just voters. They communicated to U.S. businesses and allies that the administration was serious about enforcing trade rules and demanding reciprocity. This domestic signaling influenced how trade policy was shaped, often prioritizing short-term political gains over long-term diplomatic subtleties. Thus, political considerations at home were a key driver behind the tariff threats and trade pressures, intertwining domestic politics with international economic relations in a way that shaped the tone and tactics of U.S. policy toward India. The U.S. pressure on India through tariffs and trade measures reflects a complex blend of economic interests, strategic calculations, and political signaling. It's not just about numbers on a balance sheet, but about shaping the future of global partnerships in a rapidly shifting world. Both nations are navigating challenges while seeking opportunities to cooperate in areas like defense and energy. Understanding this layered relationship helps us see beyond headlines to the real story of global influence, technology, and trade. Thank you all for listening. Wishing you the best of luck as you explore these critical global dynamics.